life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another of our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us today. The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about frustration that people have with their jobs and how the employer, the workplace, becomes this horrible place that they have to go off to every day, and they come home and complain to their family, and everybody has to suffer because of the trauma and stress of the job. And I know we wanted to continue that discussion this week, but first of all, maybe we should introduce our guest who's again with us, Stephen Mills. It's a pleasure to have you come back. We're glad you could make it.
Thanks, Gina.
Bern, last week we were talking about developing a purpose for our lives, and you said it was something that we, not a goal specifically, but something that we were always about, kind of, I guess, a model of who we are, what our objectives were or for being as a human being. And we talked about trying to create or identify a purpose for ourselves. And you had drawn kind of an interesting diagram showing that we're either going to be focused and sharp, or we're going to be kind of flat and unable to be effective in our lives. And it occurred to me, as we were talking about purpose, that oftentimes little children have clear ideas of interests, things they're naturally drawn to, that might or might not include talents or particular areas of focus that things are brilliant at, but they certainly seem to have gifts they come with that can be incorporated as part of their purpose. You mentioned for you it was to wonder, because you have a kind of mind that likes to contemplate and ruminate and think about things and observe the experiences that you go through and other people share with you. And I was wondering over the past week why we seem to lose that sense of purpose as we grow up. Because I think a lot of times it's there, maybe not always. Maybe so often it's because we're forced to fit into other people's ideas of what our purpose should be. Our parents, our teachers, our grandparents, our culture says, this is what you are as a man or a woman, or whatever background you come from. And we get lost. We forget, or we think what we want to be, what seems right in our hearts for us to be our purpose, is not right. And we give it up, we abandon it, we squelch it, we're ashamed of it maybe, even sometimes. And maybe we can discuss that a little bit on the show today.
You got me wound up again. Years ago, gosh, it had to have been in the 50s. I was driving around Dallas between sales calls. Sometimes how we do, we kind of get our act together again. And someone was talking on a talk show about gyroscopes and the major impact that gyroscopes have had on our society, and in wars and this type of thing, and in our trips to the moon, and everything is influenced by the gyroscope impact. And boy, it just flashed on me that, oh yes. And also there's a thing called psychoscopes. Now right away I thought that like you're saying, every human being somewhere in their youth get a sense of direction for their life, okay? And more often than not, it's stifled. Financially, family's never done that, or who do you think you are? You don't have a prayer, this type of thing. And so we get off course from our psychoscope, and life is troublesome ever since. For example, there was a show, Alan Funt, Candid Camera, delightful show I remember one time, where they had this real pretty blonde. I can imagine Gina doing this for them, because you'd fill the bill. But anyway, she was standing outside this hotel, and she had all this luggage, a big valise and some smaller bags and what have you. And her idea was to stop men who were passing by and to plead with them if they would please help her with her luggage, and the car's just around the corner, and it was. And of course, these macho guys, pretty hard to say no to this real pretty, vivacious blonde. And they'd say, well, sure. And she said, well, if you wouldn't mind, just carry that suitcase and I'll take care of all the rest of it. And they would walk along the sidewalk, and she would turn to go to her car. Well, the suitcase had a gyroscope in it set to go straight forward. And they couldn't get that suitcase around the corner. And it was a good bit, you know. And I thought, isn't that the way life is? We did, I would say, in the past, about 20,000 interviews. We call them socioeconomic reviews, job relationship analyses, okay? And we've asked, I mean, tens of thousands of people that if they became financially independent, would they return to their jobs? Okay, and 87.5% said no. Some were more specific than that, you know what I mean, but they said no. And then we said, okay, while after you got back from your vacation, you wanted to become productive again. You wanted to, you know, do something. What would you do? If you could do anything you wanted to do, irrespective of education, time, age, responsibilities. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Some of them thought, and they couldn't even remember. It's been so long. And others actually, you know, were tearful when they said, well, if I had my chance, if I could do it over again, I would like to have been, you know, they would name something. Was really fascinating, really fascinating. If we hadn't done the 20,000 interviews, but had contented ourselves with 1,200, which is typical in our national research surveys, you know, they'll do 1,200 interviews and they permute up what it's like. Haven't you ever wondered, though, well, that's not how I feel. I wonder where they got that. You ever have that feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we kept going. And we wouldn't have recognized something if we hadn't done at least this many. And that is that after a while, it seemed apparent. And then we go back through and examine, and it became reasonably certain that if all these people lived in the same community, and they were from all over the country, but if they lived in the same community, all doing what they really, really wanted to do, that the needs of a community would be fully served. Now think about that. That's awesome. How would you like to live in a community where everyone, the garbage man, you know, the plumber, the doctor and the dentist and the homemaker and the engineer, the craftsman, were all doing what they really wanted to do? You're talking utopia. You know what I mean? It would be incredible. And that's exactly what seems to be the case. People have violated their psychoscope. And so there's a lot of stress and anxiety and aggravation and upset and frustration and quiet desperation in our community because of it. I found that fascinating. I think the one thing that we began to catch on about was we ran into a dentist who wanted to be a garbage man. Maybe not the one who rode on the truck, although that was okay too, but he had some real specific ideas about how important that garbage collection and this type of thing was important to, how it was important to the community, and he had some specific ideas even in high school. And he had evidenced his desire to make that kind of contribution, and his father, who had been a dentist, you know, and his mother, who had been a dentist's wife, you know what I mean, and all the benefits that might come from that, and of course his grandfather had been a dentist, and so he didn't have a prayer. They said, and he said, and there was a choke in his throat, you know, that's, you can feel the sound when you hear it, that he really wanted to do that, but they said, well, they weren't going to spend a penny on his education unless he was going to be a dentist or a doctor. He was on his own if he wouldn't do what they wanted him to do. And so it's pretty easy to succumb, you know, to say, oh, well. And he was a good dentist, but not a happy one. And he admitted to that. And so then we began to go back and say, well, how many other odd choices would there be? Because we had what kind of work they were doing and what kind of work they wanted to do. And every one of them wanted to do something else, but the needs of a community would be served. I find that phenomenal. And so what's the answer to that? To listen carefully to the heart throbbing, the pulse beating of a child, you know, like a preteen perhaps, who has a sense of direction for his life, and to begin to applaud them. Today I saw Stephen talking to a baby. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's impressive. Too often they don't hear this. This little baby, 4 or 5 months old, and he was sitting there seriously talking to this baby about what she wanted to do. What were some of the suggestions? A psychologist, a doctor, you know?
The director of a radio telescope,
Right.
an astronaut, a ballerina, if she wanted to be a surgeon, if she would like to be the Pulitzer Prize winner, that she should go, seek it out. Don't stop at one.
You can do 2 or 3, all of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also said that there are too few people in her lifetime that will ever ask her these questions.
Exactly.
And
It's
hope-
possible it may never happen again. Possible. May never happen
I
again.
think it's also important to interject that for some people, what they want to do is to be a good mother, a good
Right.
housewife, their goals may not seem as lofty by society's standard,
Right.
but nevertheless, some of the most important and intrinsic roles in our society are may seem more humble and simple, but certainly valuable. And it takes a lot of courage these days to say, you know, this is what I want to do.
I'm
This
glad
is
you
how
brought it
I'm
up because
fulfilled.
I have 6 kids, you know, I read 6, and 4 of them incredibly successful, incredibly. One of them is, I'm saying financially, we'll say incredibly successful financially. A couple of them are multimillionaires, one of them is right on it. The thing of it is, Nicola, one of my daughters, all of her life, she was committed to being a great mom. And that's exactly what she is. And she found a husband who wanted to provide for the family and let her do exactly that and doing a magnificent job. Not easy. That is not, it may be a humble job by some standards, but I mean, incredible. Including home study, you know. She had all the children at home, natural childbirth, very nurturing. There's a lot of love in those kids' lives. A lot of attention. They know somehow that life is okay. No question about it. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because these people need a lot of credit. I would say one of the biggest jobs out here because one of those minds may be just ready to explode and make a major contribution to our society. And therefore she would have had a major role in our society. Oh yeah.
Well, our children are our greatest natural resource. Without them, everything else is
You start celebrating
pretty
what's in the cranium.
precarious. Yeah.
115 billion brain cells with no limitations. We need to celebrate the honor that comes from rearing that child so that they can think.
Right,
Oh,
so that
yeah.
they can follow their psychoscope, be
Psychoscope,
true to
you
the
betcha.
things that they need to be true to in their lives. So as we have roles as parents or leaders or teachers of any sort of influence over the children and young adults and teens and adolescents that we come in contact with, it's really important that we ask them those questions, find out what's in their heart, and encourage them to pursue those things that will bring them happiness and also help them to make a meaningful contribution. It's also important, I think, as adults, if we know we're not on course, to enlist the support of our family, our friends, our spouse. And I read an article the other day about a man who'd written a best-selling novel recently, and it's been on the New York Times bestseller list for weeks and weeks. And it was a novel, which is surprising in of itself. But he said, you know, he'd always wanted to write, but he'd been a professor for years and years, and his wife was the one who encouraged him to start writing. And then she encouraged him to quit his job, and he wasn't going to because he didn't think he could afford to do it. And she sent his partially written manuscript into some really big names in the industry, and they were just flabbergasted at how good it was. And so she, quietly behind the scenes, helped to push him in the right direction. And I think there's a lot of times that we can ask for that help or that we can be that help in people's
Or
lives.
accept it. Let people
Accept it.
love us, let
Yeah.
people encourage us. Yeah, you see a lot of people that won't accept that love and attention. You know, it's probably hard for him to quit his job and depend upon her
It
while all
was.
this happened.
But 10 years later,
Yes.
it was certainly worth it.
That's right. I was going to say, too, to never stop listening for or trying to get in touch with this, because it really is never too late. And I'm soon to be 69, and I'm as excited as a teenager. See, every day we run into people who are in their 50s, 55, 60, and younger, who you can tell they've given up. They lost their shot, and so they're waiting to die. I mean, you know it. And what a tragedy, because there's so much contribution they could make. It's kind of like the person says, well, I can't be a doctor because if I started now, I'd be 50 by the time I was able to practice. Well, you've heard that. You know, how old are you going to be when you're 50? Anyway, you know, why not do something?
That you like.
Yeah, and there's a
love.
lot of things that we can do to find happiness part-time, spare time, volunteer work, or even just spare time jobs that can bring us closer to what it is we really want to do, and then in that arena may be able to find ways to sprout into a full-time circumstance. I know that's one thing that this multi-level industry has afforded a lot of people, to get into a spare time business, running out of their home, find out some of the nuances of that, and be able to mushroom into real entrepreneurs, you know, where otherwise they were stuck in jobs and afraid to make a move. I know Earl Nightingale, in his recording The Strangest Secret, years ago, talked about the young fellow who got out of the military after meeting his sweetheart, and they married, and he went back to her hometown. That's not untypical. That's what I did, and got a job yet, kind of waiting and getting his head together, and kind of making that separation, and standing out by the drugstore one day, and some friends came by and said, "Hey, you're not working yet. When are you going to go to work?" He said, "Oh, I'm about ready, you know." And they said, "Well, hey, they're hiring over at the plant. You know, you got to go and put an application. We have a lot of fun over there. We've got a bowling league and softball, and that's how they make it okay, you know, sometimes."
Yeah.
And so he goes over and he applies, and guess what? He gets hired, and that's the end of him.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the end of him, because now he doesn't have time, or he feels he doesn't have time to explore and to wonder and to test himself, and maybe find the one thing that'll, you know, make his heart sing. And I think that's unfortunate. But we do have those hours in the day where we can maybe, it's kind of like, I hate to be too candid here, but I can remember as a little kid, I mean 6, 7, 8 years old, coming home from the movies on Saturday night. Up in the White Mountains, we'd go to, see, what was it, Plymouth, occasionally, and sometimes Lincoln, to go to a movie. And I would be crying in the back seat of the car coming home, and would cry myself to sleep, wanting to do what they were doing. Yeah, I mean, I knew what they were up to, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland and, you know, Shirley Temple, and these kind of people. I knew there was lights and rehearsals and what have you. And it wasn't being the actor. It wasn't being the actor. It's wanting the voice they had. You know what I mean? Like if Shirley Temple said something, the world heard it. You know what I mean? You wanted the voice because you have ideas and perceptions that you want to convey. But I mean, there was no studios up there, and I had no consciousness of these other avenues. And so it wasn't until, gosh, 1955, when I got into selling, that I found the voice. You know what I mean? Not with the clients out there, but with the sales team.
Yes.
You know, you recruit people, and they all of a sudden realize they don't know, and they're listening, and they're open to ideas that'll help them move forward with their lives. And so you had a platform off of which to do that very thing I wanted to do when I was a little kid. And, you know, I'm so grateful for having found that. And then that evolved into actually saying, okay, I'm going to do this full time. You know, I mean, I'm going to just talk and report the consequences of the wonder and the pondering and what have you. As subtle as they may be, if it can make some slight difference, then that's what it's all about. And so now you'll keep looking for a bigger voice. And the fact that our producer offered this opportunity to sit and talk, and people eavesdrop on what we're saying and maybe pick up an idea. I think you ran into someone the other day that, what did they say at the gym?
I encountered a fellow who had seen a program that we had all shared together, and he had noticed that what we were talking about, the fears, the upset, the uncertainty that comes whenever you're changing a life career, and this fellow is about to retire from the United States Air Force. In that change, he described the uncertainty and the feelings that automatic pilot that you described earlier, the fight, flee, and freeze, that primal brain of ours takes over our life, in essence, and has us just survive in that state of fear. And yet, how he had seen that there were some things to practice, some perceptions to practice that could help him move through that state of fear and actually create an additional life, reinvent who he is, probably more on purpose,
right.
and maybe rediscover the psychoscope and how it can move his life in the direction he'd always yearned to be.
I think that's really interesting because I know that some people know from the time they're very small, like you mentioned, that they have something important to do in this life. Other people maybe don't get that feeling till later on. And maybe some of the experiences that they have in their life prepare them and help them to uncover what it is that they want to do or need to do to make a contribution. And I think it's important that whoever's watching the show doesn't feel discouraged if they don't have a desire to do something, and they never have, but that they start asking the questions and do a little exploration and look at the experiences they've had in their lives and how it's shaped their beliefs and their attitudes, and where that is appropriate and where it maybe has been inappropriate. But I certainly would feel badly if anyone went away from this show thinking, that's not me, I never wanted to do anything and I'm just happy the way I am. And because sometimes maybe things do hit you later on in life.
I think we made reference to it last week, that if indeed there is a sense of emptiness, of vacancy in our lives, that to find someone who is excited, who has a mission, and join them, and we said that out of that you will find your own, it's inevitable. To be among like-minded people who want to make a difference is a very exciting place to spend your time. I mean, I see that, and you can find those environments. I know one of the things, we have a lady, Ginger McElroy, who had been to our seminar series a couple of years ago, and she said that, she made some points. She says, yeah, it's amazing. She says, every one of those essays stand on their own 2 feet. Any one of them could be meaningful and worthwhile, but you put them together, like the second one makes the first one make more sense, and the second one makes more sense because of the first one. Then you put a third one on, and that makes the second and the first one more, and you know what I mean? And she said, by the time you've seen all 10, there's not much left to talk about. And so what we're saying is to our viewers that we do a series, a course, if you would, a selection of essays which are a consequence of a lot of thought and research. And when people go through them, we've had some marvelous movement. People connecting with themselves and really moving ahead with their careers, their relationships, and everything. And in order to find that out, to be able to compress this, that might take 2 or 3 years on the show here, but to be able to compress that, to give us a call. In other words, I'm at, what is it, 366-8749, that's visible, 366-8749, and if you're outside the 916 area code, call 800. Be our guest, and call 800-661-3490, and let us know that you've seen the show, because we do need to know that people are watching, that I've seen the show, and yes, I'd like to come to a live event, and you can be our guest, as I will send out a couple of tickets so they can bring a sweetheart or significant other or spouse, certainly their teen, and they should hear this, and they can come in and see one of the essays, and it would depend upon what the schedule is and what have you. One of the more popular first ones is called Kurt Uyops. There's a lot of mystery in that, but it's a fun essay. But they can come and be our guest, no obligation at all. It's like a cookie. Famous Amos gave away cookies, and if you liked them, well, you might buy a bag. You didn't have to, and he didn't make any money on the cookies he gave away. But the hope was that would work. And that's what we're doing here. The only difference being is that Famous Amos cookie was tasty, and you swallowed it, and it was gone. Might not have been very good for you in a way. You know what I mean? Where this cookie you can savor the rest of your life, truly. And there's nothing but good that can come out of it. We'll guarantee that. But a lot of people are reserved about accepting an invitation. They say, what are you guys up to? Well, not trying to create a followership, not trying to get you involved in our business. What I do essentially is accumulate information that we can convey to people that they can go, oh, okay, and take it back to their family, their job, their club, their community, and do that a little bit better, a little bit easier. So we're not up to anything other than conveying information that seems to have made a difference. It's made a difference in my life, and I think you say it's made a difference in yours. And I don't know about Gina, if she's picked up anything in the last couple of years or not. But the thing of it is, that's the intention, and it's entertaining. I think that it goes beyond talking heads. Goes beyond talking heads. At least we intend to.
Certainly does.
Gina, anything else? Stephen? We got a lot of time left. I will say this. Let me inject this.
Sure.
If people will call, we'll go ahead and send them tickets, especially if they're the first 6. We'll have a special premium for the first 6. I have there's a tablet that we have that we'll send out to. It's called the Third Tablet. I don't know if you've ever seen that show or not, but it's a lot of fun. We found 5 additional commandments. Careful how I say that now. Commandments. They're ideas and concepts that make life a little easier, and so we'll send that out to them as well. Stephen, you were about to say something.
Well, please, whoever you 6 people are, urgently call, because it's a chance of a lifetime. I often have said to students of mine in the corporate world that I would trade all of the academic university training I'd ever received for those 10 essays, not only because it's entertaining, but primarily because it is a way to create a life's purpose that is based upon your whole psychoscope that you were discussing, and allow your life to move as well as the people that are near and dear to you and that you will encounter much more effectively, much more grandly, much more synergistically, so they're cooperative. It's an exciting life.
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing is it's entertaining. I know we call them essays because that means search and discovery and then report. We play with the language, and yet in such a way as to make it more accurate. It's kind of like a lot of people call what we do a seminar, but it's not. I mean, a seminar is a collection of authorities discussing a subject, and that's not what we do. It's not a lecture. I mean, I can't imagine being called a lecturer. It's a little more aesthetic, if you would, than that, and we have a lot of fun with it. How many of the essays have you seen live? I don't. Maybe 1 or 2, 3 or 4. See, we purposely had Gina not attend them so that what she heard was for the first time here on the show, so her questions and her reactions or responses, hopefully, would be valid, spontaneous, and it really has worked out. Really has worked out.
Well, I think it's interesting how many people avoid getting this kind of information at all costs.
Oh, I know.
I'm not reading that book. I'm not going to that seminar. I'm not listening to one of those positive attitude tapes. And you wonder what they're afraid of.
Yeah, because it's fear.
That is fear. That is fear.
I'll tell you one of the big things, they don't want to hear something that really works, because that means they've wasted this part of their life, and that's painful. And I can sympathize a little bit with that. That to think that, my gosh, here I am, 50, and I didn't have this information when I was 20, 30, 40, and, boy, that's overwhelming, and it's hurtful. So that's one of the reasons, and if we can just get past that for some people, because why not make it as happy and productive and alive as we possibly can? If we've only got another year, let's make it count. We've only got another few seconds. My name is Bern. This has been Life Talk. My name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you, Gina Fitt and Stephen Mills.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.